Welcome to the Blaze and Bush podcast. I'm Jeff Bush, and along with my co-host Jim Blaze, we are here to share with you authentic stories of God's extraordinary revelation in ordinary lives. Our hope is that, like Moses in the burning bush in Exodus 3, you may encounter the Lord through these humble experiences. Welcome to the podcast. Jim, it is an exciting day today.
It is very exciting, Jeff.
Yeah, it's exciting for a couple of reasons. First, we are hosting in studio a guest, which we have never done before. I'll introduce him further momentarily, but before doing so, we have a second announcement, and it's that we are now available via iTunes and Google Play. So you can listen to your favorite episodes of the Blaze and Bush podcast via iTunes and the Google Play apps. And as usual, you will be able to access the podcast via Podbean and any other means in which you have been tuning in prior. So, today we welcome our guest, Jeff Smith. Jeff is a personal friend of ours and recent convert to Catholicism. Now, Jeff's going to share a story of his faith journey that I'm sure many of our listeners will be able to relate to. While a Christian his entire life, he comes from an upbringing in a Christmas and Easter church-going family. In his high school days, Jeff's father had struggled with alcoholism, and his parents divorced. And to a degree, he had strayed away from his faith. Now we're going to pick up the story where Jeff is returning home from his college days. Jeff?
So I get through college, and like most college students, you graduate and move back home with mom. So this is early 2000s, right? So I moved back home with my mom, and I immediately see this change in her. She had really dug into her faith while I was gone away at college. Okay. She had almost what I would call an extreme makeover in her faith. So she was this born again, just living everything for God, Christian, really dealt a bad hand through the divorce and everything else with my father. She was working 3 jobs, just not in a great place from the outside looking in, but couldn't be a happier person. So, wow. I saw that change, and you can't help but go, I kind of want some of that, Yeah. So I started going to church with my mom, and at this point, it was a non-denominational church. So she's very involved. I actually start attending a couple of Bible studies, believe it or not, and kind of the gears start to work for me a little bit. They start to work towards the end game here. But I don't have what she has, I don't have this zealous lifestyle. Like it's just not quite there yet. But I'm probably starting to think of things from an adult perspective of my faith for the first time in my life. So, from that point, shortly thereafter, Nicole and I actually get married. That was probably my first introduction into the Catholic Church.
Was that a Catholic wedding? Sorry to interrupt.
It was a Catholic wedding, yeah, and it was going to be a Catholic wedding unless I was going to pay for it, and that wasn't going to happen. So,
like many others we've heard.
Exactly. So, it really never bothered me. I guess I had this perspective of it's all the same, right? So it doesn't matter if you're Lutheran. I have Lutherans in my family. I have Methodists. I have Catholics now. They're all Christian, and it's all just this kind of man-made religion. But as long as you're a Christian and you have this relationship with God, everything's great. So I never had any angst about the Catholic Church or a whole lot of questions at that point in time. I just kind of went with the flow, I guess would be the best way to say it.
Sure.
So, Nicole and I are going to get married in the Catholic Church. Prior to this, I did ask her dad if I could marry her. And, the one thing that resonates with me today that is kind of special, which at the time I completely took for granted, but he said, sure, surprisingly enough. And but he said that you have to promise me that you'll raise your kids in the Catholic Church. And so to him, that was that was really, really important that happened. So,
did you recognize the importance of that question at that moment in time?
I didn't. No, I didn't. I still had that attitude. Well, sure. Why would I not? Like, that's really not overly important to me what faith my children are raised in, as long as they're, believers of God. And that was kind of my attitude on the entire thing. So, fast forward from that point on, Nicole and I establish our careers. We have two great children. They attend St. Joe's as well. Really actually get very comfortable in the parish. We meet a lot of great families, a lot of great friends. Life's good,
Are you guys going to Mass together then as a family on a weekly basis? Is that pretty much?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm really drawn to it. I actually really admire the Catholic Church. My personality fits really well with the conservative nature of the way the Catholic Church is, and I just feel at home there. I always kind of did. It never bothered me that I couldn't take communion because I really didn't understand what communion was.
Right.
Okay, that's a rule they set up. It's fine. It just didn't bother me enough, honestly, which looking back is kind of surprising. But I just felt at peace there, and I felt at home there, and it didn't bother me. So. It really started for me when I look back at the journey. I had two customers that I was going to take on a trip to Nashville, Tennessee, 5-6 hour drive. So these two guys did not know each other at all. I was introducing it to them. We were driving through the evening, and we weren't outside of St. Louis. And the entire conversation has shifted now to and I've got one that's a Protestant, one that actually grew up Catholic and is now a Methodist. And so then you've got me, this quasi-Catholic. So you've got this whole mix, right, in the car. And the conversations were so riveting. These two grown men that none of us knew each other overly well just started to express their faith and all these things and it was like they'd known each other for years and years. And for me, that was the first time in my life that I'd ever been around grown men that openly discussed their faith.
Wow.
Amongst each other and it was like they'd known each other for years. And since, now they're really close friends of mine, they've become really good friends of each other. But I remember coming back and telling my wife, like, wow, that was a really neat experience. I've never had anything like that. So, and this is the way God works. So this is where the shock and awe comes in. It's just like bombardment, one after the next from this point. It wasn't 2 weeks later. There was a speaker coming to St. Joseph's. His name was Danny Abramowitz. He's an NFL, former NFL player and coach. And so I went there that night with my father-in-law and a couple other guys from the parish. And he gave this almost locker room like talk that really resonated with me. And it was, what is really a man? And it was these things that really made me look deep inside it. And a man is somebody who leads their household, in faith, and how society has feminized that. And a lot of times it's considered almost the female's role to do that. A lot of moms are the leaders in the house.
For sure.
And I kind of thought to myself, wow, that's something I've, again, never heard before. And
well, and this is coming from a point of influence, a former NFL player, a very strong man.
A man.
Somebody that you wouldn't expect this to be coming from, typically.
Exactly. And it was almost like, boy, he just let you have it like a coach would. It was, it just really resonated. And so, it was just another, a short little bit after that, and I was really on fire at this point, starting to really kind of decide who I wanted to be and how to run this family and things like that. And some amazing men from the parish started this Ignite. It's a retreat, more or less, for fathers in the parish that are kind of going through the same things that I would say I was going through at the time. How to be the leader of your house, raise your kids, all these same struggles and challenges. So. I went to that and came home from that, and that was a huge bright spot for me. I guess from that point, all these things started to really change my life. My prayer life was getting so much better. I was on target with a prayer life, things that I had never done before. So now it was going beyond just going to church on Sunday. I was really starting to feel a part of this and seeing God work in my family. Around this time, I would say my wife and I started praying together for the first time, which...
That's powerful.
It is. It's an awkward thing.
It's awkward, right?
Right.
That was our experience at first. Yeah,
absolutely. And you wonder, well, why is this so awkward? But it is. I don't know what it is, but it is. So, just these things are changing. I can see it in my kids. My kids are coming home with questions, and I'm quite honestly, a lot of them I have to table and look up and come back with a really good answer. But the process is beginning, right? And at the same time, I'm called to do a mission trip in Nicaragua, and all these things are pushing me out of my comfort zone so much. But I'm really growing at a rapid pace at this point. So the ironic thing about all this, I guess, is at this point, I'm kind of having this blooming relationship with God, and I find myself sitting in the parish now really questioning the Catholic faith. Like, okay, I've got this relationship, but why this? And why can't I take communion? If communion is so great and it's such this great thing to have, why wouldn't you open up the doors and tell everybody, hurry up, run in, take this,
Yeah.
Right.
So I start to have this angst, I guess, build up in me. So I decided at that point, I'm going to begin this journey, which probably lasted about 2 years for me. And it was a diving into the Christian faith. And I figured the best place to start with that was going to be the apostles. I wanted to understand what they were thinking at the time that Jesus was here. And up until this point, most of the Bible studies and other things that I've done was always a focus on the New Testament. My studies quickly took me to the Judaism, really, in the Old Testament.
Nice.
And it was just this eye-opening thing. I mean, it was just a part of the Bible. I really kind of always thought the Old Testament was for maybe someday when I'm really old and I have everything figured out, and I'll go back and kind of see what that's all about. But I found myself just engrossed in the Old Testament, and that led me. Actually, my brother-in-law mentioned a book to me called The Fourth Cup. And ironically, it had been a month or two earlier, but one day I said, I'm going to check that out. So I read it, and that immediately got me on fire with the Passover, and all these different things that I had no clue. I ended up coming into a book shortly after that was Jesus and the Jewish Roots of the Eucharist.
Nice.
And for me, that was the 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
There was really no going back after that. I almost was frustrated that how did I not know this before? How does everybody not know this? This should be Christianity 101. And so, yeah, at that point, I'm on fire, and I'm doing all of this, mind you, without my wife knowing anything. She knows that I'm listening. I mean, I am mowing the grass, listening to podcasts. I am on 5-6 hour drives for work, just constantly falling asleep at night with earbuds in. For all she knows, I'm watching Netflix, but I am just engrossed in this, and she can see the changes, but she has no idea that I'm teetering with the idea of becoming Catholic. And never once has my wife or my family ever pressured me in that. Never once. I find out later on that they've been praying for me the whole time, but never once did I feel a pressure not to fit in or anything like that with any of my friends or my family.
That's fantastic.
So that was great.
All right, why don't we take a break, and we will be right back. Hey, it's Jim again. I'm the kind of guy that when he finds something really worthwhile, likes to tell people about it. So I wanted just a minute here to tell you about a line of Christ-centered clothing called God's Brand. I personally have several God's Brand items: pullovers, button-downs, a really nice quarter-zip fleece. They're stylish, and they help me represent my faith in everyday life. When you get a chance, check out godsbrand.com. They have all sorts of styles for almost any occasion. Again, they're at godsbrand, all one word, .com. Check it out. You'll be glad you did.
Welcome back. Jeff, thanks for sharing the story up to this point. You know, you've obviously been going through a tremendous progression here in your faith journey. I know there's some key points that you want to continue to discuss here.
Yeah. You know, as I decided to, you know, get through, I studied my way through this and decided to become Catholic. I wanted to, before I made the final decision, there was about 2 months there where I really kind of just looked at God for, okay, just give me a sign, right? Maybe that's a stop sign, maybe that's a go sign, but I really just kind of put him to a test and waited for the sign to come. And I got it. I think when I made this final decision, I made it, and I told my wife that I was going to become Catholic, and immediately I just had this feeling of grace on me that is unexplainable. And ever since then, I've had this light. You know, it's just like I just can't. I just feel on fire for it all right now, and it's just a great feeling to have. So it's really broadcast across my entire family. It's just great to be in communion together, and my kids are just. I mean, it's a whole new way to go to church on Sunday. You know, to take communion together, and it's just been special. So.
Well, we've certainly been able to see it in you.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll tell you what, and we've seen it through your wife as well. I mean, what was her reaction like when you told her that you were going to be converting to Catholicism after all this time?
Well, yeah, after the tears stopped.
Tears of joy, right?
Tears of joy, absolutely. Yeah, she was just extremely excited, just really, really happy for me. So,
how about your kids?
Yeah, that was great. So I told my wife first, and then we told the kids, and they were ecstatic. Especially my son, just completely lit up. So it was a special moment that we had for sure.
Yeah, having come from a somewhat similar situation personally, where raising children and having a wife that were Catholic, to be able to participate in the Eucharist together as a family is really motivating. You know, I think, and really putting God definitely at the center, you know, of your family. It's just a tremendously impactful moment.
Absolutely.
You know, Jeff, as we're sitting here listening to your story, Jim, I imagine you're thinking about, you know, some similar moments here. But, you know, Jeff's story really unfolds as a progression. And we've talked about this in prior podcasts as well. You don't necessarily realize right in the moment how God is working on you. But
and he prepares you for the next moment. He doesn't prepare you always at the beginning for the end. I mean, ultimately, yes, but he prepares you for the next moment and then that time for the next moment.
Yeah, and he really was building on you, Jeff, as we look at some of the steps in this process here. But it's everything from, you know, kind of being raised in that Christmas and Easter sort of household, that check box on Sunday, as we refer to quite often, you know, to having some moments of sort of lost faith throughout college. You know, you come home and your mom has been through a Christian makeover.
Yeah, I think that witness was pretty
incredible.
Powerful, sounds like.
Yeah. And continuing the process from there, you know, I think it's fascinating when folks bring up the fact that they go on a business trip and it's completely out of context, that they ultimately end up spending a tremendous amount of time talking with other folks of business about faith. I think so often it's a discussion point that folks are really hesitant to embark on. But that's really, I think, God speaking loudly in people's lives when that voice can be raised. You know, and then he really begins to sort of aggressively get your attention. I mean, how more aggressive than a football coach and somebody of NFL influence
exactly.
to get your attention? And if that wasn't enough, it's kind of the team approach where you mentioned, you know, this Ignite retreat, you know, and you know, being surrounded on, you know, many fronts by your peers, by other men who are also going through, you know, a very similar situation. And then you glossed over something that's extremely powerful that we don't have a ton of time to get into today, but is your mission trip to Nicaragua. You know, what an experience that is. And really, what a powerful way for the Lord to put you in the middle of an extreme situation.
Yeah.
You know, so he's really been working on you and building in you over time. And finally, you get to this point where, you know, you have this recognition that Christ needs to be the center of your life, but it's through this building of emotion, these various experiences, this angst.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I don't remember if we covered this in RCIA actually, but Ignatius of Loyola many years ago describes what he calls the two periods of consolation and desolation. And desolation is when you feel a distance from God. Consolation is when you feel closeness to God. But he describes how the good spirit, how the Spirit of God works in these times, and in desolation, or when we are far away, or we need to be moved closer to God. Really, that God's Spirit sort of encourages us by creating angst, and really it's a lot of what you described of just kind of prodding us forward, if you will. When there are changes that need to be made in our lives, in our lifestyles, often. But there's a discontent, and that seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of the stories that we've heard so far. Well, and so I think part of it is that the discontentment, it's kind of like hunger. Hunger is created for food. Well, God creates a discontentment in our lives when he has something that will fill that void. It's just a growing awareness of something that's lacking, that now I understand I need it, and so we move toward it. And so it's really a great gift. At the time, it's not appreciated, but it really is a gift from God to have that angst, to feel that discontentment in our lives, because it's really our growing awareness of the situation that we've been in for a while at times.
Yeah, and speaking of a gift and of some comfort, Jeff, in your story as well, which we have not touched at this point, well, you had mentioned the fact that your wife, without you knowing, had been praying for you. Now, she also delivered a gift, unbeknownst to you, that was then delivered to Our Lady of Medjugorje.
Yeah, it's a really special story for us in our story. So my wife was approached by a dear friend of hers in the lunchroom one day, and said that she was making a trip to Medjugorje, and would Nicole like to write a letter to Mary with her intentions. And so she came home and she did that. Never mentioned a word of that to me. And this is around the time where I'm really doing a lot of this heavy studying and really trying to process things. And so Nicole delivers the letter. It makes its way to Medjugorje, and right around the time where I'm really, really kind of waiting for that sign, like, is this really what I'm gonna do? You know, I'm in major turmoil. I don't have a super strong relationship with Mary at this point, but she obviously had one with me, because as it turns out, this Lent season, the same friend comes back to Nicole as we're going through RCIA together, and meets her in the cafeteria and says, "Hey, I'm going back to Medjugorje. Would you like to write a letter of thanksgiving?" And quite honestly, I think when Nicole wrote that letter and gave that away, she took that burden off of her and just gave that to God. So it wasn't even on her mind, and she'd completely forgotten about that.
And the content of the letter specifically was requesting what?
It was requesting that I might become Catholic, that if it was in God's will, to please let my husband join in communion with our family as a Catholic.
So in the discernment process where you are struggling, you're going through this angst period that Jim had discussed, that you had discussed, your wife is simultaneously preparing this petition that's ultimately delivered to Our Lady of Medjugorje.
Correct. And, when she was reminded to write a letter at Thanksgiving, it completely hit her. Here we are in RCIA with my husband who's becoming Catholic, and this all happened like right at the same time. So
That's awesome.
her jaw hit the floor, tears, came home, told me, couldn't believe it. I had no idea that she had written a letter to begin with. So it was an amazing story to share with our kids too.
And really, it's also fascinating. She had no idea what you were going through at the moment when she wrote it.
Zero clue of what I was, life was good. I didn't want to rock the boat because if I decided not to become Catholic, I didn't want that to be a point of contention.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it was something I just kind of kept internally, and it was quite a gift at the end. So.
Well, I think that's a fantastic story. I love the fact that it was already being answered when it was asked, because the Lord knows our needs before we even ask them. I think that's just a beautiful expression of that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blazing Bush Podcast. Be sure and check out our website at blazingbush.com, as well as follow and like Blazing Bush on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, God bless.